Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Canada STEMathon, Girls and Allies 2025, sponsored by Enbridge Gas, Magna, Rockwell Automation. I'm your co-host, Karthik Sabapathy, and I am thrilled to be here all weekend long for this fabulous event. But to get started, as Canadians, it is important to recognize the land of which we are a part. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we celebrate today. We acknowledge the elders and youth, past, present, and emerging, of of all the land on which we work and live. We honor the ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. We acknowledge this land out of respect for the indigenous nations who have cared for Turtle Island, also called North America. The indigenous people have been gifted the role of caretakers of this land before the arrival of settler peoples until today. But most importantly, we remember that the history of these lands and the people have been tainted by poor treatment and a lack of friendship with First Nations who have called Canada home long before it was given this name. This history is something that everyone is affected by. We are all treaty people in Canada. We all have a shared history to reflect on, and each of us is affected by this history in different ways. Our past defines our present, but if we move forward as friends and allies, it does not define our future. All right, folks, I'd now like to introduce our co-host for this event, First Canada alum and MC and longtime STEMathon volunteer, Emily Forrester. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, Karthik. How's it going?
Emily, I'm excited. This is the sixth STEMathon. Can you believe that?
It's crazy. It's because I've been here since day one, I'm pretty sure. It's just crazy.
If you think about it, this event was actually created 6 years ago during the heart of the pandemic as a way to have our students have a way to interact. Because everything was locked down. You couldn't go places. You couldn't do things in person. But then we realized we kind of unlocked some magic with this event that doing this virtual STEMathon, which is, part hackathon, but focused more on STEM, really allowed people to connect in different ways and to solve some really tough problems.
Absolutely. And we've just seen so many amazing solutions over the years with all of our different types of themes. And I 6 years ago, I would not have thought that we'd still be having this amazing event today. So
It's a,
it's very
it's a really
exciting.
special one. And so, Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Emily. I'm a student at McMaster University in Mechanical Engineering and Society. I'm also a first alum and mentor of Team 2056. Um, yeah, it's a little bit about me.
All
And I'm
right.
also a game announcer and MC for First Rocks competitions.
That's right. One of the voices of First Canada.
Mhm.
So this event, like we said, it's not a hackathon, it's a STEMathon, where a hackathon is just focused on code-based solutions. But because this is part of First, and so First is more than just coding. So your solution could be very project-based, it could be research-based, you could build a physical model, of course it could be code-based, but there's a lot of different things. And what kind of problem were we trying to solve? We're going to give you a tough problem, and you have to come up with a creative and innovative solution through the application of STEM. And it's going to be based on this year's theme. And Emily, what could the theme be this year?
I don't know. I think everyone's just waiting to hear that theme.
Yeah, and we've had some really interesting ones in the past. We've had, we focused on adaptions for education. We focused on accessibility, access to water, transportation. What else, Emily?
Then last year, I believe we had an AI, more of an AI topic, which was really interesting and very much of a hot topic last year.
Yeah, and so this year, who knows what it's going to be, but we're going to find out in about an hour and 15 minutes. But there's a lot of good stuff happening beforehand, right, Emily?
Yeah, and we're gonna have some amazing presentations. We'll have a design and our presenting skills by alumni Lisa Rumraz and Celeste Nattel. Lisa will be doing a presenting one, while Lisa will be doing a presentation on design.
Yeah, and of course, folks, you're going to come up with these solutions, but then you're going to present them to the judges, which is going to be a big thing. And there's going to be you have to make an infographic, and there's going to be prizes. But also, we've got some fun things going on during the event as well. Tomorrow, while judging is going on, we've got scavenger hunts and STEM-themed escape rooms, and we've also got swag prizes for everything. But Emily, tell us about the big prizes this year, because the
Oh,
prizes are all new.
there are some amazing prizes this year. So we'll be giving out we have three big awards. We have the best overall, we have the best project, and the best pitch. For the best project, they'll be getting our Arduino starter kits, which are cool little computers you get to learn to do some really cool stuff with Arduinos.
It's the basis. It's like the heart of a robot, essentially.
Essentially, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
There's lots of cool stuff you can do with that. For best pitch, you'll be getting a mini portable projector so you can like do pitches at home and
O-
like or watch movies
or like watch the NBA finals.
or that that too. Whatever you want.
I was gonna
Um,
say you could watch the Leafs, but the Leafs are
well,
gone, Emily.
why
Yeah.
would you do that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Specters are gone
Anyway,
too. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, but then the best overall prize is it's are you ready? Is everyone ready? It's
I'm ready.
we have a Bamboo Lab A1 mini 3D printer. A
That is
Bamboo 3D
wild.
printer.
That is wild. It's like top of the line 3D printer
Like,
for the
yeah.
winners.
And for those who aren't sure, for best overall, it's each member of your team gets their own 3D printer.
That's right. It's not like one 3D printer for the team for all of you to
Yeah,
share. You'll each have a 3D printer that you can have at home. You can print your own parts. You can do the things. And if you're like, oh, I don't know how to use a 3D printer, you'll learn. Trust me, because it's actually
they're
like the interface is really simple. There's great
yeah.
tutorials. And also the Bamboo Labs printer is also one of those, like a lot of people say, it's like set it and forget it.
Mhm.
Where you can just print something and it's just going to go. It's not like some of the other 3D printers. We have to be like really finicky with them and have to kind of monitor it. It's like a smart printer.
Yeah. You can print lots of cool stuff with that. So yeah,
Yeah.
very
So,
exciting.
the goal of this event is to provide an engaging, interactive online opportunity for young women in STEM and their allies to problem solve, collaborate on teams, and open minds to new opportunities. When we talk about allies, allies are the folks who are going to support people through their journey. And so, this is a event open for all, but we want to make sure that people here are always, taking their chance to encourage and utilize their privilege to make room for folks who don't necessarily have that type of privilege. And that's what allyship, a big part of why allyship is important. And a group of people here we have at this event, one of the most unique things about the STEMathon is the presence of experienced mentors. We have a group of 17 mentors here, almost all of whom are first alumni and volunteers, and they are really impressive. I urge you to go into the handbook in Notion, which, your mentors are probably linked to you in Slack already, and read up on some of these mentors because their bios are very, very impressive. And they're here all weekend long to support, encourage, and advise the team. So, without any further ado, let's meet our mentors. Starting off with Amanda Lojudice and Amelia Bork.
Next we have Angela Tolis and Emiko Wood Jasundra.
Oh, I know this one. Emily Forster and Erica Rossi.
Then we have Gabby Gennaro and Jessica Bunsell.
Jenna K. Forch and Julia McFarlane.
Hey, I know these people too. Karthik Kanagasabapathy and Lisa Rumraj.
Maria Muiruri and Megan McEwen.
We have Mahek Daliwal and Michelle Petra.
Nikita Jasingani and Sally Gian.
And Sharoz Rao and Shabika Mahakal.
And Sydney Lamori and Victoria Angelini. Those are our mentors, folks. But we also have another great group of folks. These are our judges. We have a panel of industry experts who are going to be evaluating your projects and pitches, and you're going to be presenting them tomorrow. Folks, first of all, don't get nervous. I know these are really, really cool and impressive people, but it's going to be a fun conversation where you guys basically get to sell your product and share and show off your idea. So let's meet our judges. Who do we have, Emily?
Well, first off, we have Britt McKinnon, a process engineer at Hatch, and Jahek Vora, an account coordinator at Godin Productions.
We have Praneet Trivedi, Senior Mechanical Designer at Ocado Technologies, and Rishi Jotsingani, Director of Data, Prodigy Education.
And then we have Shanika Mahakal, a Special Projects Coordinator at First Robotics Canada, and Stacy Richardson, Senior Health and Safety Application Professional at 3M Personal Safety Division in Canada.
And those are our judges. All right, folks, throughout the show, you can hit us with any questions you have in the stream chat, or if you want, maybe post in the general channel on Slack. We'll keep an eye there as well, and we're happy to answer any questions you have. Get your comments going. Maybe you want to see some guesses in chat on what the theme is for this year. So maybe drop those in chat right now. But before we get to our next segment, we're going to have a great presentation on how to brainstorm and design for during something like the STEMathon. Let's take a look at a word from one of our sponsors, Enbridge.
Manufacturing is the cornerstone of our economy. However, it is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. There are a multitude of solutions, including energy efficiency, low carbon technologies such as renewable natural gas, geothermal, and hydrogen, and they all play a part in the transition towards a clean energy future.
A specific example of how Enbridge is leading the energy transition is leveraging our storage assets where we've been safely storing natural gas for 75 years, and to now look at those same assets to store new things such as hydrogen.
There are areas that you just can't electrify efficiently. So for instance, the making of steel, where they use gas or coal as part of the process itself. You have to use something that's to replace those elements, and hydrogen fits the bill.
It's just beginning. We're starting to scale up pilot projects and demonstration projects to utility scale size and implement real change.
All right, we're back. Well, Emily's back. Now I'm back. There we go. All right, Emily. I'm really excited about this next one. We've been having this presentation at the STEMathon for a long time, and I think it's just a great presentation for the STEMathon, but also just learning how to break down any sort of project. So we have someone, a really talented person, first Canada alum, mechanical engineering graduate from the University of Waterloo, and a first Canada, first Tech Challenge program manager, Lisa Ramraj. Hey, Lisa.
Morning, everyone.
How are you doing today, Lisa?
I'm good. How are you?
I am excited for the STEMathon. I want to know, Lisa, what is your favorite part about the STEMathon?
Oh, my favorite part, I think, is just seeing the wide range of ideas and topics that the students decide to focus on because the idea is that we give them a really broad topic. So a lot of the time they're super niche things. I remember one year I saw a project because I get to kind of be in the judging room that reminded me of something I did on my co-op many years ago. And I was just blown away and being like, oh my God, they came up with this. This was the same idea that we were working with years ago. Very similar. They did the research. So it was super cool to like see that come up. And then all the innovative things. And I love pretty things and I love looking at the infographics and seeing how the different teams displayed and not only their idea, but like bring their brand identity into and the team identity into their infographics and presentations. So I'm excited to see all the pretty things this weekend.
Lisa, I also want to point out we got some celebrities in chat right now this morning. We got Samosa Mom in chat saying hi, Lisa. So hi, Samosa Mom, how you doing? You know, we got all the stars right here. So Lisa, what are you going to be talking to us about today?
So I'm going to be talking about some brainstorming and design tips. So everything's going to happen super, super fast. You have less than 24 hours. So hopefully my presentation helps gives you a checklist, really. It's not meant to be a like solid process that you have to follow to the T, but kind of like when you're brainstorming and coming up with your ideas, I know for myself, if I don't give myself like an objective time or like a to-do list, I could go on forever and kind of get lost in that process and not commit to anything. But the really cool thing about the STEMathon is that you can go fast. You can have ideas, you can toss them away, you can start again really, really quickly, which is part of the fun of this whole adventure. So I'm hoping to help give you a framework that you can use for here, but also for other projects.
Well, this is going to be exciting. So Lisa, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. So, like we mentioned, I'm going to be giving you some brainstorming and design tips today. A little bit about myself. Part that kind of covered a lot of it, but I started my first robotics journey in grade 9 when I joined my first robotics competition team at my school, Team 1310. That is where I fell in love with robotics and just all encompassing building robots, programming, strategizing, making pretty things related to robots. And it inspired me to go to the University of Waterloo to study mechanical engineering. While I was there, I continued to be involved in robotics, and I had a bunch of different like co-op terms, which let me introduce me to different industries and what types of jobs are out there. When I graduated from university, I went to work as a solutions engineer at one of the companies I had a co-op with. and became the lead mentor for my robotics team. And I kind of did that until I landed here as the First Tech Challenge program manager, where I get to help all, teams all across Ontario have a similar have a robotics experience like I did, and I get to plan cool events and be part of cool events like this one. Um, Fun facts: my favorite animal is a polar bear, and my favorite color is red, which you can probably guess from my hair and the big red bear behind me. So we
Good,
can go to the
good
next.
animal, good animal, good color. So,
We can go to the next slide. Okay. So now I'm going to go do the process overview. And like I said in the beginning, this is not meant to be a rigid process that you follow to the T. That's why I didn't actually number anything, but these are the different stages of the process you're going to find yourself in. We'll go into detail about each of them individually after. So one stage, defining the problem. Another stage, research. Requirements and criteria, brainstorming, proof of concept or prototype, valuation, and final solution. On the side, you can see that there's a box pointing to brainstorming, proof of concept, and evaluation, saying that this part is cyclical. You can keep going, keep iterating through these three steps in each stage. So let's dive into the first, so one of the steps. Next slide. Hesitated to say first step, but it kind of ends up being your first step. You really want to define the problem. What is the problem you are trying to solve? When you get this theme, your brain is going to start going all different directions, and you really want to hone in on one aspect of it. Focus on identifying the root cause of the problem, not the symptoms, because sometimes you can try to address the symptoms, but if you don't get to the root problem, the symptoms are going to keep happening. Some strategic questions you can ask your group. Where are you trying to get to? Like, what is that best? What is the future that you envision? What is the best case scenario? What's stopping you right now from getting there? Some analytical questions can be, where does this problem come from? And why are things the way they are? Some other questions can be, what groups of people are affected by this? That can be a wide range. That can be very diverse in terms of culture, age, social economic background. And what impact could addressing this problem have on other areas? Because everything we do has an effect on other things.
Lisa, on the implicative questions, I think that's a really good point about what groups or people are affected by this, because I think we also have to spend extra time thinking about the groups who sometimes are marginalized by society and sometimes who don't have a voice at a table. And I think it's important for us to be the voice for those groups and try and be a little bit proactive, and as opposed to waiting for that group to, say that they have a problem, to be proactive and be like, this is going to be a problem for this group. It's like, I'll think about subway construction as an example or whatever. There's a lot of it going on, and as opposed to waiting for the community group to form and protest and say, hey, this is actually going to affect the business here or this elementary school here, to identify those problems in advance.
Yes, exactly. And this is one of the reasons it's so important to have a diverse group of people looking at a problem, because from everyone's experience brings something else to the table, a different perspective, so that you can really analyze the effects of a decision and a project from all different angles. Inevitably, we are not going to be perfect, but by having those different voices and like really trying to address those, we can be very we can make decisions quickly, and we can course correct, and having that empathy to, I think it's really important to have that empathy to, like, what I'm doing affects others, and trying to minimize the negative effect. The more specific the definition of your problem is, the easier brainstorming will be, because brainstorming kind of tends to be really hard if you have a very broad problem. So when you So you really want to tone that down. So now you have your problem. Like it's like this is really annoying, or I wish this could be better, like that thing. Now it's time to do research. Look at examples. My biggest thing, I love to make things, I love to create things. As soon as I get an idea in my head, I am on Pinterest, I'm on Google, I am starting to research all the different ways people do this, what exists, where can I get different components, and I just find that super, super valuable in broadening your understanding of the entire problem. Look at how different industries have addressed the same issues that you're looking at. So some robot examples for the first robotics people in the room are when we get our new game announced, you can look at different styles of shooters. If it's a shooting game, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples online on YouTube, on Chief Delphi, on different team websites. In all the years of the first robotics competition, we have shot all different types of balls of different sizes and different textures. And we've also shot frisbees and cubes. And when a new game, when a new game is released, the first thing I do is I go online and I hear people saying, oh, this is like XYZ game, but it's a little different this way. We should go look at what were the best ones there. What are pros and cons of different ways? So that research is super important. Another robot example is intakes. We've had over the bumper intakes, in the bumper intake, or with inside intakes, single game piece intakes, multi game piece intakes. So it all depends on what the game is. Is the holding limit only one? Or can I hold multiple game pieces at the same time? All of those things affect what you want to choose. And there's so many examples. Start there because that definitely helps minimize your like prototyping time, and like you can see what happens in different environments online and videos. Videos are so helpful. Another example, which all of you have definitely had some experience with at different points, it's how to learn or take meetings online. At a university, you've probably done it at universities, you've done it through high school. We're on a Zoom call right now, which we had to learn how to like broadcast a show on Zoom. And so like when we were doing that, we looked at different platforms and how other people did it. The best example, or not best, but the coolest example of an environment that I've come across in terms of like online learning or online meetings is this thing called GatherTown, where everyone creates their own animation of themselves, and you can actually like build out a world where you can have different desks, and when you go to a desk, the two people around you, like you can actually talk to them, like their screens will come up and you video and voice. You can sit at a presentation at a stage, and like the people around you can talk to, but you can also listen to the presentation. It was such a unique, I'd never seen that. It really made doing an online event feel very social, very like it gave you that little glimpse of like it being in person. So that was a really unique tool. And I could totally see them taking that, like looking at video games to make that happen, and kind of trying to blend the two worlds of you have to be remote, but like how can we make this feel as cohesive and in person as possible? So looking at what different industries have done, how different people have solved the problem, because the problem probably exists for a lot of people. Next slide. So now you'll want, with kind of doing that research, you're going to use that to define your requirements and criteria for your solution. Requirements are things that the design must meet or it fails. Criteria are scalable values that are used to compare ideas. Some examples are cost, manufacturability, accessibility, required training. Some robot example of this is that a requirement is that a robot needs to shoot 3 balls at a time. And a criteria can be ball scoring rate, where faster is better. think it went. Can you go back one? Sorry, 1 second. Well, I guess it's missing, but that's okay. We can stay on the slide for a second. Oh, actually, yeah, we can go to the next slide. Sorry. Okay. So when it comes to you've done your research, you have all these ideas, you've made your what are the requirements? What are the requirements of your solution? What are the like main criteria that you want to use to evaluate? Now it's time to brainstorm. So you want to focus on your requirements, definitely, but you want to hear everyone. You don't want to leave any ideas off the table at the beginning because somebody might have a crazy idea that you can't figure out. Oh, this is impossible. Can't do that. But then a few minutes later, someone might come across another aspect or bring up a point that actually makes it viable. You can have somebody coming up with a way to solve one part of the problem, and then an hour later, someone comes up with another way to solve the other side of the problem, and you can put those two together to have a full solution. Always think about, and the Karthik is probably going to love this example, but the brainstorming session for the robot that jumped into the air. We had a game where you had to like climb onto different rungs, and it kind of looked like monkey bars where like one was lower, one was middle, and one was high. And there was a team that actually made a 150-pound robot jump off the ground to grab the rung. And I imagine that brainstorming session all the time in my head, where like there's a whole whiteboard, everyone's throwing ideas up, and there's that person at the back of the room that's like, what if? What if we could make it jump? It would be so much faster.
And someone guaranteed in that room probably would have said, "Oh, come on, that's impossible."
Yes. And but they kept it on the board. They thought about it and they brainstormed, prototyped, they made it work. And that is going to hands down go down as the coolest robot in history. Okay, so that being said, don't throw any ideas out too early because they might come back around and be like the coolest one. So at some point, though, you do have to narrow down your ideas to figure out which ones do you want to explore further, especially since you have less than 24 hours here. This is probably going to happen pretty fast. So you have those ideas. Now it's time to do proof of concept, prototype. So those words, sometimes people use them interchangeably. I know I've used the word prototype many times when I mean proof of concept, but what are the differences? Proof of concept is a small scale. It shows the product or feature can be developed. It's used to verify the functionality, and you kind of use whatever you have in front of you. The prototype, on the other hand, is a to-scale model with the ability to adjust variables. It has almost all the functionalities of the final product. It's used to test against your variables. You would want to use materials close to what you intend to use for your final product. Next slide. So here is, I'm kind of going to show a proof of concept versus prototype. So on the left-hand side, it's a graph with a lot of different colored lines. And the idea here was that we wanted to see if we could use the data collected from a match to tell what a robot liked to do by plotting it on a graph. We weren't actually sure if we could do it in the first place. So this was the graphical representation that was created. Once we got here, so on the left is team 1310, and on the right is team 5406. Once we got here, we wanted to know, okay, we made a cool graph. Does this data actually tell us anything? Can we see anything visually from it? The idea of this was that the thicker the line, that was meant that was the path that the robot took more. And so after making this, we realized, yeah, we can actually tell something from this. Left, it looks like 1310's thickest lines um, were one specific point at the top, but then kind of wild lines everywhere, kind of meaning that they just will go anywhere on the field. Whereas on the right side, 5406 really favored the right side of the field. So now we knew we could do this, and we knew that it could actually tell us something useful. The right-hand side, we have a prototype of a hooded shooter. And the idea was the sides of the shooter were made out of MDF versus being made out of forgetting the word of being made out of Lexan, which would be very expensive to cut. The MDF was super fast to cut and super cheap, so we could make as many cuts of this as possible. We could change the orientation, change the hood as much as we wanted. We had different holes drilled into it so that we could change the motor placement, so we could change the gear ratios to test out different speeds. And it was sturdy enough to withstand tests for us to check ball scoring rate, speeds, all of that. But it was similar enough to our final product. So the main thing that would be different was that all of the MDF would be cut out of Lexan. Example. Next slide. So here's an example of going from a proof of concept to a prototype. So we were designing an over-the-bumper intake. So what we did was we put a bunch of 2x4s together and secured them with clamps to the table, and use scrap pieces of metal to align the different shafts, and whatever few wheels that we had at the time. And we're practicing orientation. We clamped it to a basic robot bumper just to see how it would look. We kind of measured out the orientation of all of the pieces. We then CAD'd it, figured out how we were actually going to run the belts to articulate it. And then we built the prototype version, which was made out of actual lengths. It was much longer than the proof of concept, many more wheels, and we did some testing. What we learned from this testing is that we actually needed a third bar to stop the balls from popping out the top after they were being taken in. So we learned a lot from the proof of concept and the CAD, but still testing, doing the final prototype and testing it in the actual atmosphere, it told us that if we didn't add that other bar, we were going to lose all the balls we tried to collect. So that's why going through this entire process is very important for large projects. Slide. So now you have your proof of concepts or your prototypes. It's time to evaluate. One major thing before you even start evaluating is that you want to make sure that you are comparing apples to apples, which means compare a proof of concept to a proof of concept or a prototype to a prototype. If you try to mix the two, you might get lost or enamored by the fact that the illusion to think that the prototype is better, that idea is better just because it's more polished. But it's not fair to the other idea. So you want to keep it as level as possible.
Lisa, just to jump in here, because that's such a good point. I think also it's comparing apples to apples, but also sometimes, if the best talker is talking about an idea, sometimes that's the idea you go with, but you really have to strip away the presentation portion of it and figure out, evaluate ideas and concepts for what they are. It's like sometimes someone will have an idea, they just kind of talk about it, but someone else will have an idea, but they put together a PowerPoint for it. And the PowerPoint's so compelling and everything like that. But you know, you're going to do yourself a disservice by discarding ideas if you're going to judge them based on, it's like judging a book by its cover almost to a certain degree.
Yes, exactly. So, and I know it's really hard, especially in a time crunch, but it's something that it takes practice, and it's something to keep in mind. So now, how are you going to evaluate these things? You have two prototypes. How are you going to do it? So one way to do it is by doing a weighted scale and a weighted chart. So you'll list all your criteria on one side, and you'll give them weights from most important to least important. And I have it summing up to 100 at the bottom. About the things I have in this chart right now are cost, accessibility, manufacturability, and required training. Next slide. Some other types of criteria that you would want to include in your design matrix can be things like carbon footprint, sustainability, social and environmental justice factors. Some of these things are things that we always say kind of on the side. It's like we want to make sure that we want to focus on, we want to do better. You'll hear a lot of companies say like these are things that we focus on or prioritize. But what happens is if they're not in the design matrix, then they're kind of an afterthought. So including them as a actual thing that you're evaluating against can be very important. And you can break it down to see like what are the different things you can focus on. So those 4 things that I put in the example are not the only 4 things that you can or should use depending on what your project is. One of the things could be help the most amount of people. That is a very fair thing to put in your matrix. Fair warning, the next slide has a lot of numbers, and I'm going to walk us all through it. Next slide. So this is what a design matrix can look like. Lots of numbers. Here's the breakdown. Ideas along the top, so all your different solutions. On the main column is all your criteria. So I list cost, manufacturability, accessibility, and required training. What we're going to do is we're going to rate every idea as the criteria, give them a score of how well they meet that criteria from 1 to 5. So idea 1, I gave it a 2 out of 5. For cost, the lowest cost would get a 5, which means the most expensive one would get a 1. And then you go down from there. And you multiply that score by the weight that you assigned to it 2 slides ago. Again, the highest weight is going to be the one that's most important to you. The lowest weight, least important. But still important because you put it into your matrix. The idea is at the bottom, you're going to end up with a sum. The highest sum is the one that shows the best combination of all of your criteria. This is a good way to kind of have an overview and be like, okay, which one meets my criteria the most? This is not a hard and fast rule. You can go back and tweak this. That's the whole part, evaluating, brainstorming, prototyping. You keep iterative cycle. Next slide. But let's say you are at that point where you are at the end of your timeline for your project and you're like, okay, this is the one we're going to go with. You have the idea, it's time to build it. In the real world, there would be a final evaluation stage before being mass produced, testing, all of that. And you know what? If you run into an issue you didn't predict or something new came up that was not thought of during the requirements and criteria stage, time to go back to brainstorming, proof of concept, prototyping, make changes. It is a cycle. At some point, usually dictated by time or money, you will have to work with what you have. Next slide. Now you have your final product. That's awesome. Yay. You can you want to keep learning and make it better. That's always what we're doing. We strive. You're here because you love to innovate. You love the idea of creating new things. You always want to make things better. Test your product in the real environment. Get user feedback. Did it solve the problem? What does it do well? What could it do better? Make a plan and iterate again. It's a never-ending cycle. Next slide. Key takeaways. Remember, your target demographic can be super diverse in following ways. So the people that are affected by your product: age, life cycle stage, so whether they're in elementary school, whether they're graduated, young adults, middle age, gender, economic background, religion, nationality, A solution that works in Ontario might not work in Europe, in any of the different places in Europe. Research existing solutions. Look up products and processes that exist in the field. What did they do well? What could they do better? Do other industries or corporations deal with the same type of problem that you're looking at? How do they address it? Next. Always revisit your requirements and constraints when making a design change. Are you still meeting your requirements? You do not want to fall into that trap of making a change that that goes against something that you 100% need. Is the change worth modifying your requirements? Does the design still reasonably fall within your criteria? Prototype, prototype, prototype. Use what you have, no matter how simple of the proof of concept that you want to, that you can make it, that you will always learn something from it, making it physically. CAD is amazing, doing things on the computer is amazing, but feel like having something in your hands changes the game. Evaluate how accurately your prototype represents the real deal. You also don't want to get stuck in that trap too. Next slide. References. It's always great, especially in your presentation and your pitch, to list your references for things. So don't forget that. So
Well, thank you, Lisa. So one thing I want to talk about, because your presentation talked about, if you're developing a solution to a project in like a business environment or whatever. But what we have here at the STEMathon is similar to that. It's like it's a microcosm of that, but also it's a competition. And so, we talked about requirements and everything. There's one specific set of requirements teams should really be looking at today, and that's the judging rubrics, right, Lisa?
yes. It is you'll be able to find your judging rubrics in your handbook, and by meeting those requirements in the judging rubric, you have a higher chance of winning. So make sure you go through all of those.
Yeah, for those of you who are familiar, who've been a part of the first robotics competition or the first tech challenge or first Lego League challenge, the first thing that you do is you read your game manual and you figure out all the ways to score points and analyze it and break it down. And you might realize that, oh, wait, we can jump to get up there. But with these rubrics, you have to analyze every single part and don't make sure you don't miss things. Like, for example, one thing that a lot of teams miss is the rubric actually talks a little bit about gracious professionalism. And so how are you, and first core values. And so how are you tying that in? The rubric talks about, have you consulted with at least one other mentor outside of your team? And so if you miss these things, you're going to lose points. And that means you're going to have less of a chance of winning a Bamboo 3D printer. So, you really want to be focused on this, but to read the rubric. And that's just kind of like another set of requirements that you have. And so it's important. Lisa, do you have any final advice for our teams here? It seems like you do, because you
Yeah,
just went like that.
think I just wanted to relate the reading the rubric part back to like the steps in the presentation, and that's the research part. Researching what's going to make you successful. That's like all of these things fit in. Like reading the manual for first robotics competition, first tech challenge, that is part of the research so that you can make your requirements and criteria from that. So that's just a place where it tracks. Have fun. Everything goes super fast. I think my advice would be set a deadline for like your research stage in terms of time, and you're just going to have to go with what you have at that moment. And then you're brainstorming again. Take some time. This is the fun part. This is like you're coming up with a cool idea. Give yourself some time for that, and then you kind of have to commit. And you know what? At the end of this, you can iterate on your design, or you'd be like, you know what? That one thing that we didn't have time to do, we should go look at that more. Have some fun with that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. This was informative as always. Folks, by the way, Lisa is in the Slack workspace. So if you have questions, feel free to shoot a message. Just make sure, folks, always throughout the STEMathon and throughout everything you do in first, make sure that you always, if there's 2 adults copied on all pieces of communication. So reach out to Lisa. Lisa will be in Slack, or just, post in help pitch, help project, and go at Lisa. That's probably the best way to do it. All right, folks, we are going to be back in just a moment with our next presentation. But before we do that, let's take a look at a word from one of our sponsors, Magna. All right, we're back. Hey, Emily, what did you think of Lisa's presentation?
I love it. It's one of my favorites because it gives teams an opportunity to learn how to structure how they're going to do this event. Because once you get that theme, you don't have that much time. Like,
Yeah, it's so important. And you know, you mentioned something there, Emily, about like you don't have much time. Not to give away the theme or whatever, but it's a big project, and so like it would be easy to try and change the entire planet, with your project, but you're not going to be able to do that in 24 hours. So just kind of like, when you're building a robot, you're like, wait a second, we shouldn't try and do everything. Let's maybe focus on something smaller. I think that's going to be really important for teams today to make sure that the scope of their project is something that they can handle within 24 hours, as opposed to going to the judges and being like, yeah, this is like the vision, but not actually being able to execute on something. So really keep that in mind.
and even less than 24 hours a little bit because it's due at 7 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, and you
7:30.
need to sleep.
Yeah, and sleeping is valuable. Although
Yes.
you can't, we suggest some sort of naps happen within the
Yeah,
next 24 hours.
folks, the number one thing on working on any sort of project is always your physical health. So, you
Yes.
know how to make sure that you get rested in there. All right, folks. Now we're gonna have another presentation. This one's coming in pre-recorded video from a previous STEMathon because it was just so good. We just keep showing it over and over again. It's featuring First Canada alum of Teams 1360 and Ontario 2017 Dean's List finalist, mechanical engineer, co-founder of Acrylic Robotics, Celeste Nantel, talking about how to give up the perfect pitch. And folks, we wouldn't keep playing this presentation if it wasn't so valuable. And this is great for any presentation you're ever going to give, job interview, anything like that. So without any further ado, let's take a look and let's hear from Celeste.
Hi everyone.
Hello, Celeste. How are you
Hello.
doing on this Saturday morning?
Oh, good. I got awoken by Karthik asking me where I was, so the best way to wake up.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like an in-person event. Exactly. Where's my game
exactly. Yeah.
announcer? Like we're starting match number one right now, So
Yeah. Or like, we're at 7:30 meeting, and it's like, oh right. Yeah. Oh, but it's got me reminded of the good old days of getting up really early for competitions.
yeah, well, there's a lot of good things about these virtual events. Well, obviously, we miss our in-person one, but the nice thing about like just having to get up 2 minutes before the event starts, that's a nice little bonus right there. Celeste, you were going to talk to us about a very important part of this year's competition. It's about how to give a pitch. So all of our teams, Matt, do you want to explain the pitch process with the judging?
Yeah, so you're going to be spending a total of 8 minutes in your judging room. So there's a 5-minute pitch that you'll be doing with all of your team members, and also a 3-minute question session where the judges will ask them questions. But this pitch is really important because it plays quite a big part in your rubric itself and in the marking process. So I'm really excited to hear more about what Celeste is like, the tips that Celeste is going to give, and hopefully everyone will know how to structure their pitch. And 5 minutes goes by really fast. So
Really fast. And the cool thing about the pitch is, well, first of all, your mentor is going to introduce you, and they're going to give like a 30-second introduction to like hype you up and tell everyone how awesome you are. But then you're going to give this pitch to the judges, and Celeste is going to teach you about how to do these pitch. But if your pitch is successful, you'll get a callback interview, and you'll be interviewed again later in the day to figure out who's going to win the prizes. And then the 3 big prize winners, best team overall, best overall project, and best overall pitch, are going to be invited to be at part of the FRC Awards Gala on Tuesday night to present live to the entire FIRST community. And that's going to have a massive audience because we're also going to be handing out the Chairman's Awards and Dean's List Awards for the district on Tuesday. So it's really big. But that's why we brought a superstar here today. We have Celeste, who's going to teach you how to give a pitch. Right, Celeste?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, let's do this.
Alrighty. So yeah, let's talk about notes on pitching. I just wanted to say right at the beginning that this is not a pitch, because I'm going to be breaking a lot of the rules or a lot of the guidelines I'm going to be talking about, because this is longer than a pitch. Normally a pitch is like 3 to 5 minutes and it's really concise. And so you can like do a lot more to like control what you're doing in that 3 to 5 minutes. And that's kind of the stuff I'm going to be talking about. But I just wanted to say that this is not a good example of a pitch because that's not what I'm doing. Next slide, please. So who am I? I guess I'm going to start with this because I'm not a pitching expert. I'm a first alumni that has just gone through like some experiences since I graduated, and that's how I've picked up a lot of my pitching skills. And so I wanted to share with you some of the like tips and strategies that I find that can really elevate it. So to give a bit of context, this is kind of where I've learned it from. So I'm alumni of Team 1360, Orbit Robotics. I was Dean's List finalist in 2017. As Karthik said, I did also, while doing STEM, I was in 3 musical theater productions in high school. And that really had me thinking about acting and performance, which I incorporate that in my pitch. And I feel like that's added to how I pitch. And now I'm a 3rd-year mechanical engineering undergrad at McGill in Montreal. I started out at McGill being involved with student government and student councils. So I also kind of learned of how to pitch myself and pitch my ideas and my mandates through that. And also was involved with like the Quebec Engineering Games, in which I had the chance to do improv, which also I feel like is a really good skill with pitching, is being able to think on your feet and yes and perform. And that was in French, which was even crazier because it's not my first language. And then I've done a few internships that were really interesting for example, in biophysics at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. I was interfacing embedded devices with electric cars at Geotab in Oakville. And last summer I was designing like haptic devices, so how you feel things in VR at a startup in Montreal. And so that was really, really interesting. And last spring, I co-founded with a fellow mechanical engineer at McGill, Acrylic Design and Technology, which is an art tech startup building artwork digitization tools and painting automation to allow independent artists to scale their craft as written. And we've been working on this for the past year, balancing it with school and our like own internships that we were doing last summer. And as Karthik said, we were in the Next 36 accelerator, and we were chosen for this program at the beginning of the year. And we're really excited for the next, we've gone a couple of months in the program, and now there's some more months to do, and it's really going to ramp up and get us all prepped to pitch a lot more for VCs, venture capitalists, which is going to be a lot of pitching. And I'm really learning a lot from this experience because I'm kind of going in blind and doing this all for the first time. And it does feel like a bit like running an FRC team. Next slide, please. So where do we use pitching? I really think we use pitching all the time, and which is why I think it's a super useful skill. So, I mean, if we're speaking directly, chairman's presentations is a pitch, honestly. And talking to pitch judges, that's also a pitch. And networking with sponsors, you're pitching your team and you're pitching why they should partner with you. In extracurriculars, specifically ones that I did that a lot of people do in university, for example, design teams, you're definitely going to have to pitch your car or your underwater autonomous vehicle or whatever you're working on. Case competitions are a big thing. Having a startup kind of just feels like I'm still in a case competition like 12 months later. So you really get to work on your pitching skills when you do case competitions, when you like present your solution. Hackathons, very similar. Like delegations for like I'm on the Quebec Engineering Games like McGill delegation, and in student politics you have to pitch yourself a lot, and also in internships with a lot of you will have to deal with as you go into university, going into job fairs. Every time you approach a recruiter at a booth, you're going to be pitching yourself in 30 seconds. And interviews, it's like a little pitch, even though there's back and forth. Team meetings, as the intern, you do kind of want to prove yourself and prove that you can add value. So performing well at team meetings is advantageous. And so learning how to pitch can help with that. And very similarly, like design reviews are also kind of a pitch. And in school, or specifically for engineering, which I'm in, like project presentations, you're pitching there, and even talking to profs and administration, like if you're asking for an extension on a deadline, or you're trying to get into a class that's full, you're gonna have to pitch why you deserve that and why you should get that accommodation. And so you're also using those skills there, even though it doesn't really seem like pitching using it all the time. So pitching is a performance, but it's definitely something that you can all do. And I'm gonna kind of break down some of the like granular details that I've picked up, that it's like a little bit more effort, but it can really elevate your pitch and take it from something looking kind of amateur to something looking really professional with just a couple like side things. And I'm going to be going through a bunch of those here. Next slide. So, okay, the most important part, in my opinion, for a pitch is establishing the desired narrative. So it's like, from what lens do I want the audience to view my story? Because you can have the control to set that in your pitch, and that should be reflected through the slide deck, through the script, through how you answer questions. The narrative should shine through that so that you're able to leave the audience with the impression that you want. Like, how do I want my audience to feel after the pitch? You can establish that, and you need to strategize to be able to convey that properly. Because yeah, the lasting impression is what matters. And also with a narrative, it allows you to set like only one truth that's being shared externally, because we all know in our FRC teams or in our like robot designs that there's always nuance. It's like, oh, this works this way, but has issues with this. And it's just nuance doesn't translate very well when you're in a 3-minute to 5-minute pitch. It's a lot simpler and like gets towards the audience easier when there's one truth. And like one external narrative about what the team is, or what you're presenting is, when in reality we all know that our projects and our teams are complex and layered. And it also, having one narrative or one truth, it allows for like cohesiveness between multiple presenters. So for example, when I am doing a pitch with my co-founder Chloe, and then we get to the question period, and either of us is going to have to pick up questions, kind of like when judges ask questions in chairman's. We want to make sure that we're both pursuing the same narrative, that we're both doing the same storyline, even though like it's all truth and it's all the like the team and what it is. But though like it's important to choose ahead of time what you want to be saying, because if not, it can really confuse your audience because they don't have the context to understand the nuances about your team or your project that you do. Next slide. Okay, so you want to tether your storyline. And this like very important part of the narrative is you want to be telling a story. You're not just dumping information. You're not just showing something. There's a reason that you're talking about that, and that's your story. So what I tend to use is like you like tether your pitch to an empathetic story and something that even as you're presenting information, you can always tie it back to the original storyline. So for example, that could be like a personal experience. Like I have a friend who's a founder of a new age toothbrush, and how she pitches, she talks about her experience going to the dentist and finding out she has cavities and learning from her dentist that most people actually brush their teeth incorrectly. And was the inspiration for her startup. But like, that's kind of the story that's like the intro, and that familiarizes and conceptual, like really makes it tangible for your audience, what you're talking about. Also, like a commonly experienced incident can be the storyline that you're tethering your proposition to, your pitch to. Like there's a startup, Cheaper Eats, in the Montreal community, and their pitch is awesome because they walk you through going into a restaurant, you're eating your meal, you have to pay, and then you're like, you don't want to have to wait for the bill to come to you, and then you sign it, and then it goes back, and then you're free to go. It's not a frictionless process. And you're able to feel as the audience how you're right, that is not a frictionless process, because they walk you through an experience that a lot of us have gone through and can personally tie in our head what it means. And it allows them to convey the information of their pitch in a way that really relates more to the audience, and that like makes sense because of their pre-existing experiences. Or the one that we use with acrylic is the story of imaginary archetypal characters. This one is, it's like you still get to have establish an empathetic storyline because by like establishing names and backgrounds of your characters, and it makes it people first. It's like a people first approach, and how your proposal or your pitch can help someone. And so if you're not talking about a personal experience, you're not talking about a commonly experienced incident, then you're able to relate it to these archetypal characters. So at Acrylic, we use Ella and Simon. Ella is the independent artist, and Simon is a art buyer on a budget. And we talk about our value proposition from their perspectives and how we can help them, even though Ella and Simon are just imaginary and they're just vehicles for us to talk about our value proposition. Next slide, please. So embedding required info into your storyline. This is part of like not dumping your info and having it all look like it's part of the same cohesive story that you're presenting. So you don't really want stuff that looks out of place. It should, and that's kind of like how you structure the order of your slides and the information you're presenting to make it smooth. And I guess some really like granular things that I found that can help is when you're dealing with boring information that you need to present, you can stick with the user perspective and present it from the user perspective, because it makes it more like relatable or accessible for the audience to understand. So for example, talking about the competitive landscape for why your proposition, how your proposition compares to existing things on the market or existing solutions to your problem. It's saying the pros and cons from the user perspective to how this will be used and how this will impact people. And for example, if you're going through a financial model of your proposition or of your solution, you can walk through an early adopter's typical transaction, so that it's like it makes sense to the audience and it's not just kind of like numbers and it's not abstract. It's really tangible to a person first experience. Next slide, please. Cohesive visual telling, big thing. I mean, I have black text on white slides, which is, I guess, cohesive, but you would want to have this a lot more branded on your pitch. And the brand and the visuals really set the narrative for visual learners, because someone might not really remember any of what you said during your pitch, but they might remember how your slides looked. And I have a lot of times where I remember how the slides look, but I don't really remember the voice of the presenter or the words they were saying. So the colors and shapes you use really reflect the emotions that the story projects. So like, I mean, I guess an example is if you were doing like a mental health or meditation app, maybe you wouldn't use red as your brand color, because it's not a color that's like calming or reflective. It's just red gives a very different emotional response than blue or indigo could, and that does contribute to how your story comes across towards your audience. And also like using visual proofs to support your claims and enrich your story. So I guess if you're doing a presentation about like the outreach events your team's done, you would want photos from those events. And even if you're not pointing out the photos during your speaking, just having them up there is like visual like proof and visual like support towards what you're saying. Or for example, like for a startup, it might be like you have a visual proof of like a prototype you might have done. And even if you don't talk about the prototype, just having a photo of it on the screen indicates that this is being like worked through and the technical viability is being assessed. And this is very granular, but it does actually make a difference. Having brand continuity through inconsistent visuals. So the visuals that we use on our acrylic pitch to talk about Ella and Simon are kind of just like open source graphics that we found of human characters, but we wanted to maintain like a consistent narrative and like have a consistent story, even though we're using all these different graphics. So we like made all of the Ellas have purple hair. And so that's how all of the small like girl characters became Ella. It's because they all have purple hair. Or for Simon, they all have a blue beard. And that's how we're able to take all of these like similar looking graphics and have them part of the same story. And I mean, this is really quick, but like if you're using graphs and stuff, you can still have that be on brand with your color scheme. And you don't even need to go and fix your color scheme directly in Excel or wherever you're making your graphs. On Google Drive, you can literally just like tint the asset, and you can change the color of the graph and make it match more with your branding. And it's super fast, but it makes a difference for like continuity. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so your whole pitch is leading up to your ask, your call to action, or your desired takeaway. The story should naturally convince the audience of the desired takeaway even before you reach it, just because of the story is like convincing of your narrative. The narrative is kind of like the context which leads to the takeaway. And yeah, the reason is already being narrative. I narrated, as I said on the slide. And it's like the ask, how it should be positioned in your storyline. It's like it's like, oh, we did this, and then this allows us to bring this value to this set of people. And this is how we're doing it so far. This is what we're working on. And it's like, it's the missing piece in the story that you've built is the ask, which is how the audience is a part of your story now, because you're reaching out to them and you're saying, oh, we need $15,000 or whatever you're asking for, or we would love to win the chairman's award. Whatever it is, it's like that's part of it's part of your story. And it's like it naturally brings the audience into playing a part and helping you complete the story through, and that makes them want to do your ask, or make them want to internalize the takeaway, even if it's just informative. Next slide, please. All right, write a script. I used to not want to write a script and think that I was totally fine and I could do improv and I was fine on my feet. And that might have been the case when I was like peaking at my social interaction in like, honestly, 2017, when I was doing when I was doing Dean's List, because I had my whole portfolio in my head and I knew how to answer the questions and bring an example in and tie it all together. Now I don't talk to other people. I'm in quarantine and I pitch, and I even struggle just to answer questions after a pitch. So I really do recommend writing a script, because maybe you think that like you can be fine on your feet, but maybe you're having a bad day, maybe you're tired that day, and you don't want that to be reflected in the words and the enthusiasm that you use, when you can set that ahead of time in your script. So, I mean, yeah, it ensures you're using the right words. I'm very particular about the words that we use to represent acrylic, because it shapes the external narrative that we're doing. Yeah, the narrative to be communicated, you can really establish that and make sure it's communicated by writing a script and reading it over and getting a proofread and being like, does this tell the story that I want? Does this communicate the truth that I am sharing externally? And it ensures the flow between the different slides and between different presenters. It can be hard to like hand off presenting when you're doing it with other people in front of other people. But when it's set in the slides, it's perfect. And it locks in your confident wording ahead of the presentation, which kind of goes with what I was saying earlier, where you might not be feeling it when you're actually presenting it, but that shouldn't change the narrative, and that shouldn't change the energy that you've chosen. And so you can lock that in by just using those energetic words, or using the words that are in line with your narrative in your script. And so you're going to get that across because it's in the script. And a big thing is it helps you test and maintain time restraints. All the time. We write a script and it's a minute over like a 3-minute pitch, which is a lot of cutting we need to do to get the excess content out. And it's a lot easier to do that when you have a script and you can test it and time it and go again, test it, time it, go again, than just hoping that you're going to be within the 3 minutes, because more than once I've been in situations where they cut you off at 3 minutes, which is really not a good experience. And it doesn't allow you to end your story as you want. It doesn't allow you to get to your takeaway and complete the story with the audience. It's not a great way to perform. And this is in like in class and schools, they cut you off, which is unfortunate. And also when you're like pitching your startup, for example, they cut you off. So it is pretty common. So a script can really fix all these problems, even though I'm like, I don't need to do a script, but it really ensures quality in your presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, iterate your slides. This is, I mean, kind of a no-brainer, but I like, sometimes I do the slides first and then I make the script. Sometimes I write a script, I write my story, and then I make slides to match. Either approach is fine, but once you have both, like once you have drafts of both, you're going to want to be going between them and iterating, because you want to avoid irrelevant visuals. I used to sometimes just add photos of stuff that was like kind of related to give context. That doesn't fly. Like I wouldn't do that now. Or you can't get away with it as easily now, because all the visuals should directly contribute to your narrative and directly contribute to getting your audience on board with your ask. And getting rid of redundant text is also a big thing. Like there shouldn't really be full sentences unless it's the only sentence on the slide. Also you'll see if you're saying exactly what's on the slide in your script, then you don't need it on the slide. You can say it in the script. And there is something to be said with if you have too much text on your visuals, then people are going to be reading the text on your visuals and not listening to you. And the text is up to interpretation from the audience. But what you're saying and how you say it, you have a lot more control about with how it's interpreted by the audience when it's actually coming out of your mouth instead of someone reading the text in their head. And yeah, less text is better than more. That's like always true in my opinion. And you can also like break up your slides to have larger words or larger sentences to have more of an impact, and get larger visuals. Like if you're squeezing multiple photos in and trying to get them as big as possible to fit around the words, like I have been there, it's time to just take the actual important visuals and give them their own slide. And maybe you flip slides halfway through the like paragraph or what you're saying, or even you duplicate the slide and then you have your large visual between the duplicates. So it just looks like you're talking about the things in your slide, and then you're showing the large visual that you want, and then you're back on the same slide, even though it's just like a duplicate. And it's just good for continuity. And allows you to kind of talk about a large visual in the middle of a slide instead of having to have that at the end of your slide. You know, maybe that's not the storyline that you want to go over in that specific slide. Let info breathe, so the important parts sink in. Yeah, I kind of talked a bit about that before, like having like one big sentence on a slide or like one big factoid on a slide allows it to breathe and have it more impact on your audience. And consistent branding, I guess that's another, just like as you're iterating your slides and really cleaning it up, you're going to want to look for when your fonts are inconsistent, it's not good. If your sizing is inconsistent, if your what do you call it, your indent is slightly larger on some slides and slightly larger and smaller on other slides, you're going to see that when you click through. And it's like, although this is little details and I wouldn't sweat it because it is the 20% of the year and you want to put more of your effort or 80%. If you are like really finessing this and really trying to make it perfect, those things can make a difference, even just subconsciously for your audience to see the consistent branding. Next slide, please. All right, pitch delivery, last and the most important in my opinion. I'd say definitely practice, because you don't want to go up there and do your pitch and be like, oh, that wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, because that was avoidable if you if you practiced it and realize that, oh, I don't like the way that this sentence comes out, or I don't like the way that we present this slide. This slide might look weak in our narrative. And you're able to figure that all out when you practice more than once, especially with your presenters. Don't rush. Always take your time, and when you're nervous, you're going to naturally speak faster. I probably have been speaking way too fast this whole presentation. But sometimes I'm doing a 3-minute pitch and the script barely fits in 3 minutes. So I will talk very quickly to get through it. Is it the best approach? No, but sometimes you need to, because the script is all together and you're crunched on time before when you have to present. Sometimes that happens. And sometimes I'm just like, okay, I'm going to make this script work, but I'm going to have to speak very quickly to get through it. And that's just part of it. And practicing that can help. Okay, this is very technical, but I actually think it makes a difference. Using your chest voice instead of your head voice. So especially female identifying folk, a lot of our voice is coming out of our head, and that's where the sound is vibrating. This is a bit of like theater technique. And because a lot of our vocal range is in our head, and it means that the sound that we're doing is a lot more constricted. It's a lot more nasally. It's not as loud. So I'm trying to like put a lot of my voice back up in my head to give an example. While if you're actually transitioning your voice to be a lot more in your chest and it's vibrating in your chest cavity, there's a lot more support to your voice. And also just like, especially in male dominant spaces, they're all speaking with their chest voice. It just comes out a lot louder and a lot more confident, honestly. And being able to, I guess, use your chest and use your volume, even if you're staying at the same like loudness, but it's just a fuller sound. It can deliver differently when you're pitching. It can make you feel a lot more confident and take up a lot more space in the room, which you want to be doing. You do not want to be minimizing the space you're taking in the room, just by changing that. And I guess like specifically, if you all want to try this right now for fun, is like switching your breathing from, instead of, you don't want your shoulders going up and down because that's all tight and it's all up in your neck, which is not where you want your voice to be. But stomach breathing, where your stomach comes out, allows your voice to go a lot more into your chest, and allows, it allows it to like vibrate in this much larger acoustic cavity. Stand, that's another thing. I actually don't have a standing setup in my apartment right now, which is unfortunate, and I'm pitching look great. But some of the best pitchers I've seen, pitchers I've seen in COVID times are people that do it on. It's just way more dynamic. You've got a lot more energy, and it does help how your acoustics are vibrating when you're speaking. It's a lot easier to get it into your chest when you're standing. Okay, engage and report, and don't read. Even when you're following a script and you're reading a script, you're gonna want to make these sentences dynamic, and it's like you're reporting kind of a bit like a news anchor and engaging with the audience, even if you can't see them. Like I can't see any of you. So some of the things that I've found to help make it more natural is some hand movements, a bit, not too much. It can just give a bit of, especially when we're just a little square on a screen, having a bit of movement can draw eyes towards your screen and make it a bit more engaging. Eyebrow raises, head tilts, you're like lean your chest or stuff like that. That can all just give it a bit more dynamic feel. Smile, I mean, that one's really obvious, but also I fail to do it when I'm presenting. And it really can help. And especially if you're answering a question you're not sure about, it's like can give you a bit of space to kind of figure out what you want to say. And move your eyes. I sometimes, like, I I struggle with maintaining eye contact when I'm having a conversation with someone sometimes because I'm thinking about how many times I need to blink, like, but luckily on Zoom, it's a bit less direct, but also it can be weird to be staring into a camera the whole time. So I actually look around when I pitch, and I don't know if that actually makes it a better pitch or if it makes it more distracting for the audience because I'm not always looking at the camera. But for me, at least, it gives me a bit of space to breathe of just kind of what I'm looking at and what I'm thinking at when I'm not always looking at the screen or I'm not always looking at the camera. Like just looking to the side for a sec can give my brain a bit of time for the wheels to turn for me to figure out what I'm about to do next. For example, when I'm like answering questions, which I have to think on my feet about, I can give you a bit of a breath, a bit of a moment. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so I mean, if you didn't hear any of that, the most important thing is that you've got this and that you all have the power to pitch well. And it's just about experimenting, iterating, seeing what takes, and getting feedback after your pitch is actually really important. It can be embarrassing to ask for, how did we do after you present? And like, you don't want to get roasted, but honestly, getting feedback is the easiest way to make your pitch better over time because you're going to be doing a lot of pitches and some of them are not going to be good. Some of them are going to be better. And you just want to be collecting that data so that you can get better over time. And it can take years. Don't stress about it. You're going to have lots of opportunities to use this to its full potential. Yeah.
Thank you, Celeste. Okay, that was amazing. There's a lot of information. I was like taking notes through it, and so I have like things I want to talk about here. And I think it's really important. So number one, we actually have a lot of people with theater and vocal backgrounds who are participating in the STEMathon today. So I think it was really cool that you showed that your background in those areas are so beneficial for what you do. And like I remember when you became a game announcer for First Canada, that was one of the things that, you know, when I was talking to you about doing this job, I was like, oh yeah, you're a singer and theater and you're good in front of crowds. But I love just the breathing talk. These are things that you can be used in so many different ways, right, Celeste?
Yeah, and it feels really weird to be rethinking about how I'm breathing, but it actually, like I'm like doing it right now, it can really make a difference for how your sound comes out and also just how your body looks and how it's structured. I guess I didn't talk about this in my pitch, but what I really found useful is thinking about this bone right here, and I want to turn it up. It's not about like moving your shoulders back. It's just turning this bone upwards, which puts your shoulders back and sets you all up and gets your neck on top of your spine and gets all the voice going where you want it to go. I know that's very granular, but I do find it is helpful.
It is helpful. It's the same old trick, like, you know, use your diaphragm, not your throat, you know, like project, project, project. You talked about how details matter. And I think this is one that a lot of people miss because a lot of people are like, you know, like, oh, I don't need to line this up. You know, they don't think that way. And no one's going to look at your pitch and be like, oh, it's not lined up, I'm not going to give them the money. But it subconsciously has an effect. Like when you have random font size changes or, you know, like everything's organized, but one thing isn't, or, you know, one bullet point off. Those little details truly do matter. And you obviously have to get the big details solved first, but the little ones matter. So I thought there was a neat connection between your presentation and Lisa's presentation. Lisa's presentation, you know, a lot of it was focused on answering the question, what's the problem we're trying to solve? You know, and when you're designing something, it's easy to lose track. And when teams are working on their projects this week, it's going to be this weekend, you know, you have to go back to what's the problem we're trying to solve. And I think with giving a pitch, it's what's the narrative we're trying to send. And that's the strategic design of the pitch, right? It's like you have to identify the narrative that you're trying to get across and make sure everything is supporting that narrative.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And
for
like,
sure.
but to me, it's just like that comes back to building a robot, because when you're building a robot, for those of you who are involved in FIRST, you're trying to answer the question, how are we going to win the most matches, or how are we going to win the turn? And it comes back to that. And so like having this singular point, like to me, like that was so insightful, Celeste, because I hadn't thought of it like that, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, and like you just totally reminded me of 2017. We had a low ball output and spent all this effort and all this like metal and volume in our robot on an indexing system of balls to go into the low goal, which we used 0 times in competition. So it just like wasn't good it wasn't good like commitment to the narrative and commitment to the actual problem, I guess, which is get the most points as possible in the field. Yeah, and I like that's a great link to R&D because, or to brainstorming, because it's very easy to get like distracted by opportunities of cool things to design or cool problems to solve, but it's not necessarily the problem that we're trying to solve and that actually gets us points or that actually gets us the next meeting if we're thinking about this in pitching.
So a question I have for you, Celeste, when you're giving a pitch, do you try and do research on your audience to kind of tailor things to their skill set?
I should, and that is the best way to do it. I actually like, I mean, I'm gonna admit that I lack at that, and sometimes I just go in without knowing, and it's bad, and it always doesn't go well because the people ask a question and I'm not sure in what lens to use when I answer it, because I don't know the pre-existing perspective that they have coming in to see my content and see the narrative that I'm doing, and being able to cater your answers to what people know. And you can find out all that online. You can search up who you're going to be presenting in front of. It's just like it's also part of showing you did your homework, which people really appreciate. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think there's like there's a valuable skill here. And like perhaps we talked about this when you were getting ready for one of your scholarship interviews. It's about so if you don't know who it is and you're going in, without that advanced knowledge, it's reading the room. And this is a really hard skill to develop. You have to do it really quickly because you don't have much time. But reading the room based on other cues that you have to try and figure out. And as you're pitching, watch their eyes, see what they're interested in, and then know where to focus on. It's like, oh, I've caught someone's attention here, and it's like I now have to reel that person in. And so reading the room is a super valuable skill because when you understand your audience, like one of the big things is, Celeste, you talked about telling the story and walking it through. And when you walk someone through a story, there's 2 different paths you can take. You can take an emotional path, or you can take a people respond to those things very differently, but some people who like the numerical path do not want to hear the emotional path. And some people who like the emotional path have no interest in the numerical path. But if you can figure that out, oh, you are set. So
yeah. It like I just like you said, I sometimes I see on Zoom when people react or when they move when a particular slide is up, and I'm like, okay, interesting. I have to figure out why that slide triggered that reaction. And also if it's a good reaction or a bad reaction, like also gives me information about what I need to change or what I need to emphasize more. And also, I guess like sometimes the questions you get at the end of your pitch can be very indicative of where your pitch needs work. Because if they're asking questions and you're like, why don't you understand that? It's because you didn't do a good job at communicating it. So, and it's always not the audience's fault when they don't get it. It's the presenter's fault for not communicating it or catering it for their lens.
That's fabulous. Celeste, we do have to go because everyone's super excited about the theme, but this was a fabulous presentation.
You are muted, Karthik.
And we are back, folks. That was a fantastic presentation right there by Celeste. Emily, it was just, I've seen this presentation so many times, but I'm just like overwhelmed by the amount of important things that were in there. It was just like, that was almost like a checklist, of things that you need to do tomorrow during your pitch to the judges.
Absolutely. It's the best pitch presentation I've seen, and it goes through everything you need to know for anything, not even this event, like literally anywhere you need to make a pitch in the future, whether it be presentations, like presenting her startup like she mentioned, or presenting for classes and such. Like this is the best checklist to follow.
So that presentation is available up on YouTube. We'll post a link into the Slack after this, once we've really revealed the theme and whatever. But I highly recommend you go back through it and just take down some of the notes from it and use that as you're working on your pitch. All right, we're going to be back in just a couple seconds. We're doing a little bit of a reset here as we get ready to unveil the theme. All right, folks, we're back, and you've all waited long enough. I think it's now time to unveil the theme for this year's first Canada STEMathon Girls and Allies 2025. Emily, you ready for this?
I am so excited for this.
All right, let's see it. Let's take a look right now.
We don't choose the moment disaster strikes. It happens fast, without warning, without mercy. But behind every disaster, there's a lesson. Behind every crisis, a chance to respond. Behind every rebuild, a better way forward. From the quiet before, to the chaos during, to the challenge after, what we do at every step matters. And in the face of it all, we ask, how do we prepare? How do we protect? How do we rebuild stronger? This is your challenge.
Well, there it is, folks. Disaster relief, risk reduction, and response. Emily, what do you think?
I'm so excited. This is just such it's a very different theme than I think we've had in recent years. And so there's a lot to do and there's a lot for these teams to think about.
Yeah, and folks, there's so many different approaches with this. And like let's just before we even talk about what you're going to dive into, let's talk a little bit about how important this theme is. Uh our world is afflicted by natural disasters. They've been happening since the beginning of time. Unfortunately, over the past 20 years, they've started to come a little bit more frequently. Some of that is attributed to climate change and humans also living in areas where they traditionally didn't live in. And so, we're infringing upon nature as opposed to nature infringing upon us. But if you think about the wildfires in 2023, where there were fires all over British Columbia and Ontario, but like northern Ontario and northern Quebec, and we were having wildfire smoke down here. We think about the impact of hurricanes, tornadoes every year, about what it can cause with famine and drought. And we live in a very modern society, but we don't necessarily have the tools to get responses and relief out quickly enough because so much of our society is relying on technology, which sometimes goes down in the times of disasters. So how can we respond in that way, right, Emily?
Absolutely. And natural disasters are something that's very hard to predict when they're going to happen. We have definitely grown recently and we know more than we knew before. But it's still something that they happen and we have a very short amount of time to respond to those disasters. And we need to respond timely and the best way we can. I think that this theme can give teams an idea of trying to think about that and how there's not a lot of time in those windows to respond and to recover from it.
And if you think about it, there's a lot of different approaches you can go with this theme because I know sometimes it's like natural disasters. What do we do? So,
Mm,
like Emily talked about, it could be you could focus on prediction and like weather forecasts, that sort of stuff. You could talk about prevention. What can we do to change things to make disasters less likely to happen? Which is hard to do, but like for example, with forest fires, there's definitely possibilities there. You can talk about the response and how we deal with things when they're going on there. And then relief efforts. How do we maybe it's like an app to help with evacuations, how do we move people at scale? Or how do we if there is something where power is out for a long time, how can we ensure that we have a stable water supply, a stable food supply? There's so many different things to think about here. But because there are so many different things, I want to warn all the teams here. You don't need to try and solve everything. Like, a great project that it would be amazing if someone could solve is like, how do we prevent earthquakes? Well, I mean, people have been thinking about that for thousands of years and no one's really come up with a solution on that sort of thing. So like you don't want to go like overly big. You want something that you can scope out and solve in 24 hours, or at least put together the bones of a solution here. So it's there's a lot of possibilities here. Hey, folks, but I know you want to get into the brainstorming, and I know you want to dive in. Emily, anything else you want to say on natural disasters?
I just think it's a really awesome theme, and I cannot wait to see what these teams come up with in their
Yeah,
when I'll be around in the Slack, so if you need anything, I'll be there and I'll be checking in to see how teams are doing.
it's I'm really excited to see it all. So I know you want to get started with your brainstorming, but before we do that, to talk a little bit about our theme and to welcome everyone to our event, please welcome the chair of the First Robotics Canada Board of Directors, Dorothy Byers.
Good morning, STEMathon participants. I'm Dorothy Byers, Chair of the Board of FIRST Canada, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you this morning to welcome you to this great event. Congratulations on stepping up for the challenges you'll face today. Remember that you are working in an incredible environment with an amazing team and with the support from a wonderful group of mentors. Learn everything that you can. You often hear us speak of girls and allies who are confronting the challenges of diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM fields. Diversity of thought and experience provide the best resources to solve challenges. So listen carefully to each other and build on the thinking that comes to light as you work together. And as always, have fun and learn as much as you can. You will be using your creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, artistic, oral, and teamwork skills as you solve this year's challenge. And wow, is it ever topical? We hear about, and unfortunately, many of us have experienced the impact nationally and locally of wildfires, floods, ice storms, devastating winds, and internationally, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, tornadoes, and earthquakes, all of which create disaster for humankind. Unfortunately, my family, like many of you, experienced the impact of ice and water this spring. We quickly realized exactly how vulnerable we were without heat, power, water, internet, or even cell service. It's scary when our trusted resources abandon us. So this year's theme of disaster relief, risk reduction, response, and recovery give you the opportunity to consider the opportunities that we have to mitigate the impact of disasters. We know that you are totally up to the challenge. And of course, as the TV icon of children's programming, Mr. Rogers said, always look for the helpers. And you have helpers here. A shout out to the youth alumni members and FIRST staff who will be with you every step today. They're an amazing group who want you to be the best that you can be and to excel. Use their expertise and learn as much as you possibly can from each other. So best wishes for a great experience. Be proud of what you accomplish. And I hope to see you again at another great FIRST event. Have fun.
All right, thank you, Dorothy. Emily, so it's time for teams to get started with everything that's going on. So what's happening now?
What's happening now is teams are gonna head onto their Slacks and they're gonna start talking with their teams and they're gonna start brainstorming and think of some ideas for this amazing theme.
Yeah, and so folks, remember we have a couple channels, help pitch and help project. If you need any help in there, post your ideas, post there. That's a way you can cross collaborate and you can get access to the other wonderful mentors and planning community members who are the group who will have some ideas.
And be sure to take a look at your Notion because you do need a second mentor to talk to and to get their opinion. So if you go through the Notion, they have all the mentors' bios in there. So some of them have different expertise than others. So if there's one mentor you really want to talk to, make sure you head on to Help Project or Help Pitch and at them and try to join them over to your channel. There's also instructions on how to invite a mentor to your channel in the Slack. So take a look at that.
Yeah, and folks, there's also some other awards going on throughout the event. There's the Gracious Professionalism Awards, and so mentors, make sure that if you see acts of gracious professionalism on your team or another team, that you denominate that so they can win some First Canada swag. And then the deadlines, folks, all your materials, so your slides, for your presentation are due at 7:30 a.m. tomorrow. There's more details in Notion on that piece. And judging starts at 8:30. There's a judging schedule in the Notion already loaded up in there. And so judging starts at 8:30 promptly. We'll have details on how you access Zoom and how you get set up for all of that. And then tomorrow at around noon, we'll be starting the activities, which includes the scavenger hunt and the escape rooms, which I've heard are fantastic. I haven't seen them yet, so maybe I have to come in and play along with all of you. And then we're going to be starting our live show for the finale and our awards at 3 p.m. tomorrow at this same Twitch channel. So, folks, I know you want to dive in. Slack's lighting up like a Christmas tree. So have fun, good luck, and I cannot wait to see what you come up with. See you in Slack, folks. Bye.
See ya.